Hi there. So in this video I'm going to be using a image drawn by a artist called DragonFuga. He is on DeviantArt. I can't link to his profile in the description because his work is definitely not safe for work, but I'm using his drawing of Batgirl as a reference, and I'm not anticipating I'm going to get particularly close to his drawing, but I'm just going to see how close I can get and just practice using the different techniques that I've learned so far to try and make it at least look good as a standalone image. Obviously if it were put side by side with his original, it would not pale in comparison, but you know, we'll see how we can get. So what I'm tending to find at the moment is that trying to draw maps of the face like I did just a moment ago, I find it quite difficult at the moment. So I find it easier to draw a landmark part of the body first, for example the eye, which is what I'm working on at the moment because I'm fairly confident with drawing eyes now, and then using the scale of that eye and its position to kind of dictate where everything else is. So obviously the importance of the rotation and the scale of the eye is quite important. One of the mistakes that I make in this drawing, and obviously I'm not talking and drawing at the same time, this is me recording afterwards. This video is sped up about 5 times because the actual finished article just drawing the head took me about 2.5 hours, so obviously I've sped it up significantly. One of the things that the mistakes that I initially make is actually drawing in the shading in areas that I don't need to, because I can do a shading and highlights pass afterwards. So I kind of learned that, and you'll see later on in the video I actually start erasing some of the shadows that I've drawn around this eye to actually do them in the shadow and highlight layer instead. So I'm just trying to get my eye colours blended nicely so that it doesn't look too jarring of a transition, but there's still a very clear highlight there on the underside of the pupil. And again, these shadows are actually quite soft in the original, so I will go back over them with the smudge tool to blend them in and make them a little bit more natural looking in transition. And then I'm pretty happy with the overall look of the actual eyeball itself, so I'm just adding some of the other details now, some of the actual parts of the eye that aren't, and then here we are drawing one of the shadows that I'm actually going to remove a little bit later on. And this isn't perfectly colour matched to the original either. I did consider importing the original into another image and using that to select colours, but I actually kind of want to do this with my own colour choices, and I may not necessarily be right, but once you've got the eyeball in place and shaped and sized correctly, you can then sort of use that as a roadmap as to where the eyebrow needs to be, where it needs to end. And again, just using my smudge brush to kind of smooth out the transition of colours in the eyebrow. So I'm now sort of doing a colour pass of the flesh underneath the eye. And this doesn't have to be exactly the right size for the space in the hole, as long as it's bigger than the space for the hole. It's fine. It's because obviously I'm going to draw the mask on top of everything else, so as long as I've put enough in there. Now immediately I've identified that I needed to actually draw in the whites of the eyes in a layer underneath the eye so that it actually was white, and then that sort of eradicates that weird effect of the flesh colour being in the eyeball. And at this point is where I start putting together the shadow and highlight layer. Obviously I've made a bit of a boo-boo here and not locked the opacity of my flesh layer and joined the shadow layer to it, so I'm just sort of correcting that now. And I'm just sort of was refining the shape of the fleshy area there, but that wasn't really necessary. But again, it's just a learning process. Now I can add some shadows and highlights to the eye area to make it look more three-dimensional. And I think it's at this point that I realised that I didn't actually need to draw in those shadows, so I just delete them and then put them in properly using the shadow. There we go. So removing that one, and then I'll come back to drawing that in a bit later. Again, just removing the shadow from the areas that I've drawn it in and then putting a new one in. And then again, now just working on adding some dimension to the eye area to make it look a bit more natural. Yeah, the black bit was kind of getting on my nerves, so I removed it. And again, the process of adding shadows and highlights it's one of those things that, you know, you can refine it as much as you want, but my next step is to start getting the scale for the other eye right, and I'm using sort of a pen, using my pen up against the screen to get me the scale, or holding it up in front of my face so that I can get the scale right. And it's never going to be exactly perfect. I mean, the guy who drew this DragonFuga, you know, even they make mistakes and they don't get things exactly identical, but as long as it looks okay, it looks kind of right, then that's all that matters, really. Obviously, I don't want to speak for them. And you might see me flipping the screen every now and again. You actually have to set up a custom hotkey to do that for the whole image. Photoshop doesn't have a native keyboard shortcut to flip the screen, as far as I know. So you had to go into the preferences and actually put that in, so that it just enables you to see the image from you know, from the other angle, to just check that it looks right, because you can, it's like looking at it with a fresh pair of eyes when you flip the canvas. As you can see, I learned my lesson. I'm actually drawing in the white of the eye this time. The beauty of using this technique is if you do spot a mistake, for example, I feel like my right eye, my right iris was smaller than my left, so I was just able to easily extend it. I feel like the pupil on the right was slightly larger than the pupil on the left. So, in order to go back and fix that, it's not a hassle. It's nice and easy. Whereas if I were obviously painting on a real canvas, that would be a major kind of snag. So it's time to do the shadows and highlights on the right hand eye. It has to be said that I think there is some merit to the suggestion that you should do like warm-up drawings before you do anything big like this, because I found that by the time I got to doing the highlights and shadows on the second eye, that my eye was already kind of warmed up, and I found it a lot easier to blend them, blend the colours and draw it accurately. So perhaps that's something that I'll put into practice in future, is just using doing a smaller drawing before I do a big one, get my eye in. So I was finding the drawing, the bits that I'd drawn already, a bit of a distraction with regards to the positioning of the next element, which is going to be the bottom of the nose. I'm just going to sketch it in for now to give me an idea of its position, and then again, because I'm drawing it on a different layer, I can sort of get the position a bit closer once I've done that. So there you can see I moved it just down a bit so that it looked like it was more in the right position. And now I'm just sketching in again the shapes of the eye holes. Now that I've got the eyes and the eyebrows drawn in, it's a little easier to get them in the right place. And sort of once I've tweaked the position of those bits, I can start working on again sketching in the position of the eye holes of the mask and the bottom of the mask, and then that'll give me a better landmark as to where the nose and the mouth need to be. I'm still terrible at drawing mouths. I think they are, aside from hair is my biggest flaw, and then mouths are kind of a bit of an Achilles heel as well for this kind of drawing. If I'm drawing just a standard sketch for a comic, I find drawing mouths much easier, but for something like this where you're colouring in the lips and shading it really sort of thoroughly, is a bit of a sticking point for me. Now the bottom of the mask is going in. Again, just a sketch outline, and then I'll do some colouring afterwards once I've got the positioning roughly right. And the character's looking slightly off to one side and slightly down, so that's why the left-hand side of the mask looks different to the right. And I'm not going to draw the full height of the ears. I'm going to cut it off just down from the top. And then I can just block in the majority of it with black, and then that gives me an idea of where the mask is going to sit and any refinements I need to make to the mask and the fleshy colour around the eyes. And I'm going to be refining the eye holes and the sides of the mask pretty consistently throughout until I'm happy that it looks smooth. Now that I've got the mask drawn in, I can now start working on the jawline, which is obviously going to allow me to see where the mouth needs to be, and also give me some more area to put colour and shading and highlights. And obviously going to sketch in the ears as well at this point. And then I will remove the sketch lines from the outside of the details of the ears and the jawline once I'm in shading, because I'm going to draw those all in shade as well. So now that that's drawn in, I can now start adding the shadows and highlights to the actual lower face. And then that will enable me to visualize more clearly where other facial features are going to be drawn in. So I'll start off with attempting to draw a sketch of the mouth. I think I'm going to just bin this once I've sort of eyed it in. I'm going to remove it, just wanting to check that I'd left room inside the lower jaw for the mouth with positioning of the nose. So here we go with the shadows and the highlights of the facial area. Again, there are some obvious ones that I'm going to sort of nail fairly soon, and then I can work on the more tricky bits afterwards. So we're getting to the stage where I'm running out of excuses to not draw the mouth, so I'm just going to smooth out the ears, which look absolutely horrendous at the moment with the eraser tool. And then I'm going to draw in the highlights for the ears and then work on the mouth. So it turned out not to be too bad after all, drawing the mouth. So I'm just going to check that it's in the right place, in the right scale, and then that'll be it for this drawing. And I will continue adding probably the body in perhaps another video. We'll see how I feel when it comes to doing this a bit later on. But thank you ever so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. But leave your comments down below and take care of yourselves. Bye bye.